of America, their top court, the American Supreme Court, has struck down Donald Trump's tariffs. The court said that Trump exceeded his authority as president to impose those tariffs, and this was in violation of federal law. It's the biggest legal setback to the US president. Tonight, we'll examine this ruling and discuss the repercussions. What does this verdict mean for Trump? What does it mean for the US economy? And what does it mean for the rest of the world? What happens to the trade deals that Washington has signed? Meanwhile, at the AI summit in New Delhi, the political meetings wrapped up today, and India has joined Pax Silica, a US-led alliance to build alternative supply chains for rare earths. Also in focus, the war build-up in West Asia. Will Donald Trump attack Iran? He has given them 10 days to agree to a deal. How Pakistan embarrassed itself at the very first meeting of the Board of Peace. How the Taliban has delivered another shocker. Domestic violence, they say, is legal as long as no bones are broken. Why Chinese AI model Seed Dance is rattling Hollywood. Why governments around the world are mulling social media ban for children. As Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg insists that his apps are not designed to be addictive for kids. How the UK plans to end the monopoly of Visa and MasterCard, why Macron and Meloni are squabbling in Europe, and a new dinosaur species has been discovered by scientists in Africa. It's said to have been as big as a school bus. All this and more lined up. The headlines first. Big setback for US President Donald Trump. The country's Supreme Court strikes down his sweeping tariffs that upended global trade. The conservative majority court ruled that the tariffs are illegal. The apex court also said that Trump had exceeded his authority and violated federal law in unilaterally imposing them. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi criticizes China again as she addressed the parliament after her election win. Takaichi called out Beijing over its actions in the East China and South China Seas. She said Japan is facing its biggest security challenge since the Second World War. She cited threats from not just China, but also Russia and North Korea. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz will visit China next week. He will meet Chinese President Xi Jinping for talks on Wednesday. This will be Merz's first official visit to China since he took office last May. Germany is Europe's top economy, but many of its companies are reeling from intense Chinese competition. Saudi Arabia and Turkey sign a major solar power deal. Riyadh will help Ankara build solar plants capable of powering more than 2 million homes. This follows a multi-billion-dollar energy agreement. In recent years, ties between the key regional players have steadily improved. And the World Food Programme issues a dire warning. It says it will have to stop humanitarian aid in Somalia by April if there is no new funding. The warning comes as more than 4 million people in the war-torn country face food insecurity. A massive setback to US President Donald Trump. His sweeping global tariffs have been struck down by the US Supreme Court. The verdict came just a short while back. 6 out of 9 judges ruled that Trump's tariffs are illegal. 6 judges out of 9 said the tariffs are illegal. Only 3 judges sided with the US president. It is undoubtedly the biggest blow to the Trump presidency. One that basically undoes months of threats, negotiations and deals. It's hard to overstate how crucial this verdict is, not just for the US, but for the whole world, because Donald Trump pinned his entire policy on these tariffs, both his foreign policy and domestic policy. It was all based on the tariffs. He announced the tariffs in April last year, a baseline of 10% plus varying rates for each country. Trump claimed that these tariffs would wipe out the US trade deficit. He also said that they would bring back jobs to America, but even then experts were skeptical. According to US law, you need approval from the US Congress to impose sweeping tariffs. You need congressional approval. But Trump did not go through the US Congress, that's the American Parliament. He did not follow the process. Instead, he used an old emergency law, a law from the 1970s. That's when businesses and US states sued the White House. They claimed that Trump's tariffs were illegal. And today, the US Supreme Court has sided with them. It has agreed, it has ruled that the tariffs were indeed illegal. Now, despite this verdict, 3 questions remain. 1, Will the Trump administration use different rules to reimpose the tariffs? Will the tariffs really go away, or will Trump find another way? The White House, in fact, has been preparing for this eventuality, so a reimposition of tariffs cannot be ruled out. That's the first thing to note. Secondly, what happens to the paid tariffs? Some $250 billion have been collected so far. Will that money be refunded? The top court has left that matter to the lower courts in America. So that's still to be figured out. And finally, what happens to the trade deals? Will countries renegotiate, or will they stick to the old agreements? These are the three questions to watch out for. We're still waiting for more details. Earlier today, President Trump was on a call with American governors. Reports say he called the Supreme Court's decision a disgrace. I'm sure a much longer Truth Social post is on its way, because, like I said, this is a major setback for him. As recently as yesterday, Trump was making an attempt to defend his trade policy. Listen to what he wrote, and I'm quoting. The United States trade deficit has been reduced by 78% because of the tariffs being charged to other companies and countries. It will go into positive territory during this year. This is what Trump posted yesterday. He was talking about trade deficit. What is a deficit? When you import more than you export, you have a deficit. Say your imports are $100 billion, your exports are $50 billion, then your deficit is $50 billion. Basically, the difference between imports and exports, that's a deficit. In recent decades, the US has always run a trade deficit. They've always bought more than they've sold. Their last surplus was back in 1975, and this was a cornerstone of Trump's campaign. He promised to impose tariffs to cut down America's deficit. He claimed it would bring back factory jobs to the United States. Well, it's been 10 months of tariffs and deals. And what's the verdict? Let me show you the official numbers from the US government. The goods deficit in 2025 was $1.24 trillion. That's around 2% higher than the previous year. The deficit was higher than the year before. It's also the highest deficit since 1960. So Trump's claim is absolutely false. The US deficit did not fall by 78%, as he put it. It in fact rose by 2%. And just to be clear, we have no idea where Trump got that number from. But one thing's for sure, his grand tariff plan is not working. Not in the market, and now not in the court of law. Tariffs were supposed to curb American imports, yet imports are up in the US by 4.7%. Americans imported goods worth $4.3 trillion last year. But the silver lining is the exports. American exports did rise. They rose by 6.2% last year. The problem is this is not translating into jobs. Trump's tariff plan had two objectives. One was to reduce the deficit, and the second was to bring back American jobs. But right now, the opposite is happening. American manufacturers cut 80,000 jobs last year. So to recap, the deficit is at a historic high, and the jobs are being cut. Then what did Trump's tariffs achieve? They have shaken up America's import mix. Basically, the share of each country in US imports, that has changed. The deficit with China has tumbled from $295 billion in 2024 to $202 billion last year. That's a 26% drop in America's deficit with China. Similarly, the deficit with Europe is down by 7%. But with other major producers, the deficit has widened, almost 44% with Vietnam, 14% with Mexico, almost 97% with Taiwan, and around 28% with India. That's right. America's trade deficit with India widened last year by 28%. And that means two things. One, the China-US trade relationship is degrading fast. Imports from China were down almost 30% last year. That's the lowest level since 2009. Unless there is a deal, this trend will accelerate, and we don't know what happens to deals now in the wake of the US Supreme Court ruling. So we'll have to wait and see how this plays out. And we saw this, in fact, during Trump's first term as well. His tariffs on China led to opportunities elsewhere. Countries like Vietnam and Thailand emerged as alternative hubs. This time, though, there is another concern, and that's point number two. If deficits are the problem, Trump may go after these countries next. He's already imposed 20% tariffs on Southeast Asian nations. Those tariffs have been declared illegal today, but we'll have to wait and see what strategy the White House comes up with. Will they stick to their guns, or will they agree with what the Supreme Court has said? And the US is running a massive deficit with these countries. So these countries could have a target on their back, irrespective of today's court order. And that also includes India, by the way. For all we know, we could be stuck in a cycle. When China's surplus rises, Trump tariffs them. When India's surplus rises, he tariffs us. When Vietnam's surplus rises, the same thing happens. The question is, how do we exit this cycle? Well, the court ruling today gives hope, but this will be fixed if common sense prevails. No country can produce everything in the world. It's simply not possible. Also, a trade deficit is not automatically bad. It often reflects your country's affluence. Wages in America are 5 times higher than wages in China. So naturally, making in China will be cheaper. This is not some grand conspiracy against the US. This is how economics works. Unless Donald Trump acknowledges that, the problem will get worse. The immediate thing to see would be how this standoff with the Supreme Court plays out and how Donald Trump responds to today's ruling. The US Supreme Court, like we said, has said that Trump's tariffs are illegal. 6 out of 9 judges have ruled that the tariffs are in violation of the federal law. It's been a hectic week in New Delhi, a lot of meetings, a lot of speeches, a lot of announcements, and of course, controversies. All on the sidelines of the AI Impact Summit. Today was the last day of the political gathering, but the exhibition will remain open tomorrow as well. So if you want to see the AI devices and the prototypes, it's still open for one more day. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi had another packed day today. He met OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. He also met Qualcomm CEO Cristiano Amon. Of course, no summit is complete without a joint declaration. This one also had a combined pledge. Around 70 countries, 70 countries have already signed on it. It's the Delhi AI Declaration. The government is expecting more than 80 signatories by tomorrow. That's a good number to have. The problem is it's not binding. No country is required to follow these pledges. It's more of a suggestion or a guideline. Nonetheless, bringing 70-plus countries together is no small task. It is more proof of India's bridging credentials, India's ability to bring together the West and the global South. We've shown it again. Today, India's IT ministry gave an assessment of the last few days. The summit saw more than $250 billion committed to India's AI infrastructure, $250 billion in commitments, plus another $20 billion in venture capital promises. The IT minister called it a grand success.
This AI Impact Summit has been a grand success on many fronts. About more than 5 lakh visitors have enjoyed this exhibition, learnt a lot, interacted with many experts from the world. We had practically every major AI player in the world participating in large numbers. This is a very important sign for us. The world has confidence on India's role in the new AI age.
We saw another big announcement today. India officially joined America's Pax Silica initiative. The ceremony was attended by India's IT minister and the US ambassador to India, Sergio Gore. So what exactly is this initiative? It's basically aimed at creating reliable supply chains. Supply of what? Rare earths and other critical assets. These materials are key to emerging technologies, whether it's AI or 5G or renewables. So the US is creating an alliance to secure these supplies. As of now, there are 11 members: Australia, Greece, Israel, Japan, Qatar, South Korea, Singapore, the UAE, the UK, the United States, and now India. Beyond these, there are non-signatory members like Taiwan and the European Union. Their primary mission is to break China's dominance. You see, Beijing has a stranglehold on emerging technologies. Look at rare earths. China makes up 70% of the production and 90% of the refining. That's a near monopoly for Beijing. Same with solar panels. China makes 80% of all solar panel components. Equally worrying is battery minerals, things like cobalt, nickel, and lithium. Chinese companies refine more than half of all output. And this gives Beijing a lot of leverage. Look at what they did to the US last year. When Donald Trump imposed tariffs, China restricted their rare earth supply. And the result was this: Trump came to the negotiating table. Another example is Japan. Their prime minister, their new prime minister, Senator Kaichi, made comments in support of Taiwan, and immediately China curbed rare earth supplies. Even India is facing similar battery and rare earth restrictions. Hence the need for Pax Silica. It's an attempt to break free from dependence on China. The question is, what does India bring to the table? Listen to India's IT minister.
We all know semiconductor industry will need about 1 million more talented people. 10 लाख से ज्यादा सेमीकंडक्टर इंडस्ट्री में टैलेंट की रिक्वायरमेंट है. वो टैलेंट कहां से आएगा? कहां से आएगा? कहां से आएगा? यहीं से आएगा. और उसकी तैयारी कैसे की है? 315 यूनिवर्सिटीज, 315 यूनिवर्सिटीज.
Skilled labor and a large digital ecosystem. That's what India is bringing. The likes of Qatar and the UAE will bring the money. Meanwhile, Israel, Japan, and the US and South Korea will bring the tech. These are countries with an established AI and chip industry. The US is betting big on this initiative. They say it will shape the 21st century.
India joins Pax Silica, the coalition that will define the 21st century economic and technological order. India's entry into Pax Silica isn't just symbolic, it's strategic, it's essential. India is a nation with deep talent, deep enough to rival challengers.
I know this sounds simple on paper, but there are two major questions here. One, can we trust the Americans? The other Pax Silica members are all US allies, but India is not. So if push comes to shove, will Washington stand with us? That's the first question to consider. Secondly, how will China react? We are in the middle of a reset with Beijing. In the short term, we are reliant on Chinese supplies. Things like batteries, rare earths, and chips, we need them from China. Will this alliance rock that boat? Will the Chinese impose more curbs in retaliation? The fact is, we cannot be sure. In an ideal world, India would try to do this alone, basically create its own reliable supply chains. Unfortunately, that's not possible. We need the tech, we need the investments and the know-how, which means we need these partnerships. Of course, the bigger question is, will this take off? Because remember, the US has announced similar proposals before. You had the Quad supply chain proposal, you have the India Middle East Economic Corridor, or IMEC. All of these plans were announced with great ambitions, but they're yet to take shape. I guess that will be the biggest test of Pax Silica. Will the promises lead to concrete gains?
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network. This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Huge development this, which has ramifications across the globe. The US Supreme Court has just ruled that Trump's invocation of the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, which was the legal basis for which through which he used these tariffs, imposed tariffs across all of America's trading partners, it has ruled that that was illegal, that in this context, Trump could not invoke this 1977 law called the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, which is a presidential act that was brought in when Jimmy Carter was president. He's used a particular section in this IEEPA to justify the imposition of tariffs. Remember, he announced his tariffs on the 2nd of April on Liberation Day. It was paused for 3 months. And then from the end of July, he announced a series of deals with a host of countries, starting with the UK in May, and then, of course, eventually countries like Japan, South Korea, the European Union. India's was one of the last deals to be struck, and that happened just a few weeks ago. It happened in the last week of January, where India's rate was brought down from 50% to 18%. Now, all of that is history because the Supreme Court of the United States, all judges have sat in on this judgment, and by majority, they have ruled that Trump invoking these questionable and contentious clauses of the International Economic Emergency Powers Act is flawed, is deemed illegal in law. What are the global ramifications of this? What are the ramifications of this for India? I want to go across to Akanksha Swaroop. So the core issue was whether the president had the powers to do this, and the Supreme Court has ruled that no, he does not have the powers. In this instance, they have deemed this as illegal.
It's rather symbolic. Zaka, remember a day ago only CNN was talking about how the Trump posters and banners have been in fact flying over the U.S. Supreme Court, and it couldn't get more authoritative than this for the Supreme Court to be reminding the U.S. president that they reign supreme at the moment. And this is what the ruling is also stating. Remember, critics were already arguing that the statute does not grant the president any such authority to implement any kind of broad-based trade tariffs. Now, the other question is going to be that will this, under this ruling, will this cover the ambit of the already forced bilateral trade agreements? As you were also talking about, India has managed to finalize the details just days ago. Also, all the tariffs that has already been collected, what happens to that? Are there going to be now suits slapped against the U.S. president? There are going to be a host of anomalies.
Akanksha, just give me 1 second. Raymond Vickery is now joining us. Mr. Vickery, thank you for speaking with us. So the Supreme Court of the United States ruling that it is illegal for the U.S. president in this instance to have invoked the International Economic Emergency Powers Act to impose tariffs on the rest of the world. What do you make of this hugely consequential decision?
Well, thanks very much for allowing me to comment on this. It seems to me this is a great day for American democracy. There's no question that in regard to tariffs, particularly President Trump has marched toward an authoritarianism that is not in accordance with the United States Constitution or existing law. Previous decisions of the Supreme Court indicated that the Supreme Court might not be willing to provide the checks and balances that are in our Constitution. This, along with the midterms which are coming up, gives me great hope that we can get American democracy back on a constitutional path. In regard to the tariffs, it's plain that the United States Constitution gives the right for taxation to the legislative branch, not the executive, just to act on whatever whim the executive may feel. So this is correct. And if you look at the statute which has been invoked, you can see that there really is no basis in the statute.
In West Asia, the threat of another war of military assets in the region. At the same time, US President Donald Trump is negotiating a nuclear deal with Tehran. Basically, he's using America's military might to have his way at the negotiating table. Last evening, Trump set a new deadline for Iran. He's given them 10 days to make a deal, failing which, Trump says, and I'm quoting, bad things will happen.
They can't have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. You can't have peace in the Middle East if they have a nuclear weapon. And they can't have a nuclear weapon. And they've been told that very strongly. It's proven to be, over the years, not easy to make a meaningful deal with Iran. We have to make a meaningful deal. Otherwise, bad things happen.
So Trump is narrowing the window. Earlier, he had given Tehran 2 weeks to agree to a deal. Now he says that they have only 10 days. But with Donald Trump, deadlines are not always what they appear to be. Remember what happened last year. He set a similar window for himself. He said that he will take 2 weeks to decide whether to bomb Iran's nuclear facility at Fordo. But he did not wait for 2 weeks. He struck Fordo within days. And he did so with far less military deployment around Iran. This time, he is much better prepared for an escalation. And by all accounts, he's seriously considering that path. This week, Trump convened his senior advisors, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and of course his son-in-law Jared Kushner. Trump was briefed on 2 things. First, the status of talks with Iran. And second, his military options in West Asia in case talks fail. Now, as you know, 2 rounds of talks have yielded no breakthrough. And in this period, the military options have only increased because the US has deployed some serious firepower in this region. This includes 2 aircraft carriers, the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald R. Ford, 6 missile destroyers, 14 other US Navy warships, dozens of fighter jets, more than 85 aerial fueling tankers, more than 170 cargo planes, and 6 early warning and control aircraft. Put together, these assets can inflict enormous damage on Iran. Take the USS Abraham Lincoln, for example. It's one of the biggest aircraft carriers in the world. This carrier alone can carry out more than 125 bombing missions in a day. If you add the second aircraft carrier, the Gerald Ford, then we're looking at several hundred aerial strikes over a period of several weeks. They can sustain that kind of attack. So this level of deployment gives Trump a range of options militarily. One option is targeted strikes. You target the Iranian leadership, like their Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and his core team. A second option is going after Iranian nuclear sites again, or even conducting an aerial campaign on military and government sites across Iran. At this point, the Americans are well placed to pull off all of these, and Tehran knows that. It knows that this poses an existential challenge. So Tehran has mobilized diplomats at the UN. Iran's ambassador to the UN has written a letter addressed to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and every member of the UN Security Council. We have a copy of the letter. It carries a warning for Donald Trump. It says if Trump attacks, Tehran will respond in kind. Let me quote, in fact. All bases, facilities and assets of the hostile force in the region would constitute legitimate targets in the context of Iran's defensive response. The United States would bear full and direct responsibility for any unpredictable and uncontrolled consequences. In simpler terms, if the US attacks, Iran will target every American base in the region. That means all of America's West Asian allies will get drawn into this war. Tehran is perhaps hoping that this will rattle the Arab states and they will prevail upon Trump to stand down. Of course, its best hope is a breakthrough in the talks, but it won't be easy because neither side is budging on the red lines. The US is firm on its position. It says Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Iran should give up the enrichment program completely. Iran has indicated that it's open to concessions on this point, but it says the US must first lift the sanctions. Washington also wants Tehran to end its missile program. But for the Iranian regime, That's non-negotiable. Their missiles are their biggest defense. They won't give them up. Reports say there is some common ground, though, on economic matters like oil and gas, mining, and Iran's ability to purchase aircraft. We don't have the specifics. The White House has issued a statement. It said that they expect Tehran to get back with more details in the coming days.
I think you heard from the administration and the State Department yesterday that there was a little bit of progress made, but we're still very far apart on some issues. I believe the Iranians are expected to come back to us with some more detail in the next couple of weeks, and so the president will continue to watch how this plays out.
Israel, too, is watching how this plays out. The Israeli army raised its level of preparedness this week. Their military spokesperson said, and I'm quoting again, "If we are attacked, we will respond forcefully." Yesterday, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a warning to Ayatollah Khamenei. Here's what he said.
We are operating in close coordination with our great ally, the United States. I made clear to my friend President Trump the principles that, in Israel's view, should guide any negotiations with Iran. We are prepared for any scenario. And one thing is certain, if the Ayatollahs make the mistake and attack us, they will experience a response they cannot even imagine.
This growing tension is making the markets nervous. Yesterday, oil prices jumped to their highest level in nearly 7 months. Brent crude rose by close to 2%. Brent crude is a global benchmark for oil pricing. It is trading at around $72 per barrel. One barrel has 159 liters of oil. Currently, it's at $72. Prices of gold are also shooting up. Earlier today, gold was trading above $5,000. That's for 1 ounce of gold or 31 grams of gold. $5,000. What began last month as a domestic protest in Iran over inflation has spiraled into a serious standoff with the US and could descend into a regional war. It's a story we're tracking very closely for you. They say foreign policy is complicated, sort of like chess, but with much higher stakes. But not for Pakistan. For Pakistan, foreign policy is as simple as rock, paper, scissors, except they always throw paper. Just ask the defense minister, Khwaja Asif. He says Washington used Pakistan like toilet paper. Well, the paper is back for more. Yesterday, US President Donald Trump hosted a meeting, the first meeting of his Board of Peace, the group that he's created to rebuild Gaza. He's calling it the Board of Peace. Guess who was seated right at the back? Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. Now, to put that in perspective, the FIFA chief was seated ahead of him. One handles football, the other has a nuclear football. Yet Pakistan was put behind the FIFA chief. Of course, their Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif was not about to give up. He came to the meeting with one objective. How much can I praise Donald Trump? Cringe, cringe max, or cringe pro max? Sharif chose the last option. Cringe pro max it was.
Your timely and very effective intervention to achieve ceasefire between India and Pakistan potentially averted loss of tens of millions of people. You have truly proved to be a man of peace. And let me say, Mr. President, you are truly savior of South Asia.
He's calling Donald Trump the savior of South Asia. I wonder what's next. Maybe Sharif will declare that the T in Pakistan stands for Trump. I'm sure even MAGA is cringing at this flattery. But then again, that's Pakistan's policy. They don't have money. They don't have the military prowess. They certainly don't have capable leaders. So what do? They remain subservient to Washington. But coming back to Sharif's comments, what exactly did Trump save South Asia from? Did we miss an alien invasion or a planet-killing asteroid? Well, Trump himself gave the answer. He once again claimed that he mediated the India-Pakistan ceasefire.
I pick up a certain newspaper. I won't tell you which one because it's fake news generally. But I picked up this newspaper and I saw that Pakistan and India were really going at it. And then it got worse and worse, and many planes were shot down. It was all out. And I called them, and I said, listen, I'm not doing trade deals with you two guys if you don't settle this up. They said, no, that has both of them. They didn't want to do that. I said, no, it has to. If you don't do it, I'm not doing a trade deal. We're not doing a trade deal. And they do a lot of business with the United States, and they sort of softened up all of a sudden. And all of a sudden I read where there was a little bit of a pullback by one, then the other, and all of a sudden we worked out a deal, right? But I said, if you fight, I'm going to put 200% tariffs on each of your countries, which essentially makes you not allowed, you can't do any business. One of them, I won't say which one, said, no, can't do that. They both wanted to fight. But when it came to money, nothing like money. When it came to losing a lot of money, they said, I guess we don't want to fight.
Peace may not be Trump's strength, but math certainly isn't. Sometimes he claims that 8 jets were shot down. Sometimes he says 10. And sometimes it's 11.
They weren't fighting. They were fighting. 11 jets were shot down. Very expensive jets. 8 planes shot down. They were going to go nuclear, in my opinion. 10 planes were shot down. They were going at it.
Now, just to be clear, Trump did not mediate the India-Pakistan ceasefire. It was strictly a bilateral decision. Indian missiles hit Pakistani military bases. Pakistan called India for a ceasefire and India agreed. This is what happened in May last year. Yet Trump keeps claiming credit for the truce. And that too at a very sensitive time. India and the US have just agreed to a trade deal. The final details are still being worked out. In fact, next week, a team from India is supposed to be going to Washington, hoping to put ink on paper around mid-March. I'm sure India has gotten used to these provocations by now. New Delhi is looking at business, not bonhomie. But Pakistan's case is very different. They've always given importance to optics and visibility. Meeting the US president is a big deal for them, and sharing a stage with him, even bigger. But looks like the sentiment is not reciprocal. At one point, Trump called up Shehbaz Sharif like a teacher in class. And the Pakistani Prime Minister stood up gingerly. Take a look at how this played out.
Pakistan and India, that was a big one. And just, I think you should actually stand. Come, please, stand just for a second. Pakistan and India, thank you very much. And I spoke to Prime Minister Modi. He's excited. He's watching us right now.
On second thoughts, I know why Sharif was seated at the back. Because look who's in front of him. The World Bank chief Ajay Banga. What better vantage point to ask for loans? But jokes aside, what was the outcome of the Board of Peace? Top US officials unveiled plans for Gaza. Member countries also pledged $7 billion in aid. And for Trump, Gaza is just the start. He wants this board to act in parallel to the United Nations to legitimize his imperialist campaigns. Just think about it. The United Nations would have never approved his operation in Venezuela. But his Board of Peace, well, they would have sanctioned it without doubt. And that's the idea here. Create a sense of legitimacy and approval for Trump's actions. I know it's not an ideal forum for peace, but the fact is you have to engage at some level. India has not joined the Board of Peace yet, but yesterday New Delhi sent an observer to this meeting. So India is cautious about this so-called board. As long as Trump is in office, this board may remain relevant, but after that it's likely to be a footnote in history, just like Shehbaz Sharif at yesterday's meeting.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Huge development this, which has ramifications across the globe. The US Supreme Court has just ruled that Trump's invocation of the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, which was the legal basis through which he used these tariffs, imposed tariffs across all of America's trading partners. It has ruled that that was illegal, that in this context, Trump could not invoke this 1977 law called the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, which is a presidential act that was brought in when Jimmy Carter was president. He's used a particular section in this IEEPA to justify the imposition of tariffs. Remember, he announced his tariffs on the 2nd of April on Liberation Day. It was paused for 3 months. And then from the end of July, he announced a series of deals with a host of countries, starting with the UK in May, and then, of course, eventually countries like Japan, South Korea, the European Union. India's was one of the last deals to be struck, and that happened just a few weeks ago. It happened in the last week of January, where India's rate was brought down from 50% to 18%. Now, all of that is history because the Supreme Court of the United States, all judges have sat in on this judgment, and by majority, they have ruled that Trump invoking these questionable and contentious clauses of the International Economic Emergency Powers Act is flawed, is deemed illegal in law. What are the global ramifications of this? What are the ramifications of this for India? I want to go across to Akanksha Swaroop. So the core issue was whether the president had the powers to do this, and the Supreme Court has ruled that no, he does not have the powers. In this instance, they have deemed this as illegal.
It's rather symbolic. Zaka, remember a day ago only CNN was talking about how the Trump posters and banners have been in fact flying over the U.S. Supreme Court, and it couldn't get more authoritative than this for the Supreme Court to be reminding the U.S. president that they reign supreme at the moment. And this is what the ruling is also stating. Remember, critics were already arguing that the statute does not grant the president any such authority to implement any kind of broad-based trade tariffs. Now, the other question is going to be that will this, under this ruling, will this cover the ambit of the already forced bilateral trade agreements? As you were also talking about, India has managed to finalize the details just days ago. Also, all the tariffs that has already been collected, what happens to that? Are there going to be now suits slapped against the U.S. president? There are going to be a host of anomalies.
Akanksha, just give me 1 second. Raymond Vickery is now joining us. Mr. Vickery, thank you for speaking with us. So the Supreme Court of the United States ruling that it is illegal for the U.S. president in this instance to have invoked the International Economic Emergency Powers Act to impose tariffs on the rest of the world. What do you make of this hugely consequential decision?
Well, thanks very much for allowing me to comment on this. It seems to me this is a great day for American democracy. There's no question that in regard to tariffs, particularly President Trump has marched toward an authoritarianism that is not in accordance with the United States Constitution or existing law. Previous decisions of the Supreme Court indicated that the Supreme Court might not be willing to provide the checks and balances that are in our Constitution. This, along with the midterms which are coming up, gives me great hope that we can get American democracy back on a constitutional path. In regard to the tariffs, it's plain.
Our next story is about a law. It says a husband can beat his wife as long as there are no broken bones or cuts. You heard that right. Violence is allowed, just do not leave evidence. Now, you would think that this was a rule from the Dark Ages, a brutal relic from a time we've left behind, but this is not history. This is happening right now in 2026 in Afghanistan. The new law is part of a newly circulated penal code. Reports say it has been signed by the Taliban supreme leader, Haibatullah Akhundzada. This new code lays out a chilling system. It divides Afghan society into multiple ranks. You have the religious elites, you have the upper class, middle class, lower class. If you commit a crime, your punishment depends on your rank. If someone powerful commits a crime, they might get some advice. If someone poor commits a crime, they could get a prison sentence or corporal punishment. And guess where women are ranked in this system? Well, women are listed at the level of slaves. Reports say this law allows husbands or so-called masters, that's what they call them there, to punish women physically. There's one condition, just one condition, no broken bones or open wounds. So you can beat your wife, but you must ensure it's not life-threatening. If injuries do not cross that line, beating won't count as a crime. In other words, domestic violence is now legal. And if you thought that was bad, there's more. If a woman wants justice, she must appear in court fully covered, and that too with a male guardian. What if the only male guardian around her is her abuser? Well, then she has no choice. The husband may have abused her, but if she wants to complain against him in a court of law, she must go to court with him. What about her family, her parents? Well, another clause takes care of that. If a woman goes to her parents' home without her husband's permission, she will face punishment. And not just the woman, her relatives too. They could all face jail. Basically, if you've been abused in Afghanistan, do not seek justice or even safety, because the law will paint you as the criminal. This should tell you about the state of women in Afghanistan. In 2021, the Taliban stormed back to power. Since then, women's lives have been shrinking. First, they lost the schools, then jobs, then parks, then the salons, then gyms, then their voices, and now even their safety at home. That too is gone. Girls are banned from secondary school. Women are banned from most jobs. Public spaces are restricted. Travel without a male escort is forbidden. And the control does not end here. The Taliban have even pushed rules about house design. Windows that might expose women to outside view must be covered, blocked, or removed altogether. Do you know why? Because the Taliban says seeing women doing everyday tasks could lead to quote-unquote immoral acts. So what's the solution? Hide the women. Remove them from Afghanistan's daily life. Experts are calling it gender apartheid, a system where half the population is being systematically erased. Afghanistan is the most restrictive country in the world for women. When the Taliban took power, they said that their second stint would be different. They promised that women will have their rights. Yet here we are. Domestic violence is being legalized as long as you do not break a bone. And I dare say they will not stop here, because there's nothing stopping the Taliban. No fear of reprisal, no censure, no condemnation. Instead, the world is slowly opening its doors to them. Dozens of nations, including India, have hosted their representatives. Some have sent official delegations to Kabul. Others have signed trade agreements. There are even talks of removing sanctions and terror designations. These governments justify engaging with the Taliban as a strategic requirement, as realpolitik. For the regime in Kabul, it marks a win. But for the women in Afghanistan, it marks a global betrayal. And we're talking about 14 million women here. They are being erased from public life. They're being denied dignity and safety. And the world is looking away because standing up for Afghan women serves no strategic purpose. So let me end by saying this. This is not just Afghanistan's shame. This is a blot on the world's conscience, because when a regime legalizes abuse and a world normalizes it, silence becomes complicity. Our next story is about Hollywood. Last week, we told you about Hollywood's latest problem. It's in panic mode because of a new Chinese AI model. It's called Seed Dance. This tool makes realistic videos within seconds. And it has now triggered a major showdown. Several Hollywood studios have shot warning letters to ByteDance. ByteDance is the Chinese company that owns Seed Dance, and it has got letters from the likes of Disney, Netflix, and Paramount. So what do these studios want? They want Seed Dance to stop using copyrighted material. They say the AI is stealing their content and creating videos without permission. ByteDance says it is fixing the issue, but the outrage over the latest tool is only growing. Here's our report.
Hollywood's biggest studios are at war with ByteDance. 5 major companies have sent warning letters to the Chinese tech giant. Disney, Netflix, Warner Brothers, Paramount, and Sony all are demanding the same thing: stop using our content. The issue? An AI tool called Dance 2.0. It launched last week from ByteDance, the company behind TikTok, and it immediately sparked massive controversy. Dance is unlike anything we've seen before. You type a simple text prompt, and within seconds, you get a 15-second video, complete with motion, sound effects, and even dialogue. The quality is remarkably realistic. Users quickly started testing its limits. One viral video showed what looked like Tom Cruise fighting Brad Pitt on a rooftop. Another featured Donald Trump in a kung fu scene. There was even Kanye West dancing through a Chinese palace, singing in Mandarin, all generated in seconds. But then users went further. They started recreating Hollywood's most valuable characters. Scenes from popular series, including Stranger Things and Breaking Bad, were recreated. But here's the thing: none of it was authorized. That's when Hollywood started panicking. Disney sent a cease and desist letter accusing the company of a virtual smash and grab. The company claimed Dance came preloaded with Disney's copyrighted characters, all being used without permission or licensing. Netflix followed with its own letter. It called Dance a high-speed piracy engine and threatened immediate litigation if ByteDance didn't comply. Warner Brothers accused the company of blatant infringement. And it is not just the studios taking a stand. Major Hollywood groups are also calling out the Chinese company. This includes the Motion Picture Association, which represents all the major studios. The union, Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, has also criticized ByteDance.
This is unacceptable and undercuts the ability of human talent to earn a livelihood. Dance 2.0 disregards law, ethics, industry standards, and basic principles of consent.
That quote reveals the real fear. This isn't just about copyright, it's about jobs. If AI can create scenes in seconds, what happens to the careers of millions of people? Under pressure, ByteDance has responded. It released a statement saying it respects intellectual property rights.
We are taking steps to strengthen current safeguards as we work to prevent the unauthorized use of intellectual property and likeness by users.
But the statement provided no specifics on how it plans to prevent misuse. And Hollywood isn't satisfied with vague promises. The studios want concrete action. They want their intellectual property removed from the AI's training systems. And look at the timing. The United States and China are locked in an AI arms race. DeepSeek shocked the tech world last year with its breakthrough chatbot. Now Dance is being celebrated as China's next AI triumph. The technology is advancing faster than laws can keep up. For now, the warning letters are just the opening move. What comes next is uncertain, but what is certain is this: the collision between AI innovation and creative rights has arrived.
Now let's talk about Meta, the company that owns Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. They're facing a landmark trial in the United States, a trial that could shape how social media platforms are regulated worldwide. The charges against Meta are quite serious. It is accused of building features that keep children addicted. And Meta is not the only one named in this case. Google's YouTube is also accused of the same thing, of encouraging addictive use among children. Earlier this week, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg testified in court, and he rejected the claim that Meta's apps were designed to hook children. But social media companies are already on the back foot on this one. Governments across the world are looking to limit their reach and to ban social media for children. Our next report has more.
For years, the world's biggest social media platforms have shaped how teenagers talk, socialize, and spend their time. Now they're facing a harder question. Did they design their apps to keep young users hooked? That question is at the center of a major trial in the US. Meta, the parent company of Instagram and Facebook, is one of the defendants. Google's YouTube, TikTok, and Snapchat have also been named in the case. A young woman has taken these companies to the court. She says she began using their apps as a child, arguing that the platforms are deliberately built to encourage compulsive use. As a result, it has harmed her mental health. This week, the spotlight fell on Meta's chief executive. Mark Zuckerberg took the stand for the first time before a jury on this issue. Lawyers confronted him with internal emails and company research. Some documents discussed teenage users, while others referred to targets around increasing engagement. Zuckerberg pushed back. He insisted Meta does not allow children under 13 on Instagram. But he admitted the company was slow to improve age checks.
Meta has had different conversations over time to try to build different versions of services that kids can safely use. But I always wish that we could have gotten there sooner.
Zuckerberg also rejected the idea that Meta's goal was to maximize screen time. He argued that phone makers and app stores should share responsibility for keeping minors off these platforms. This case sits within a much larger legal storm. It is one of thousands of lawsuits in the US over the impact of social media on young users. Experts say it could become a turning point for the industry as a whole. And it comes as governments around the world are losing patience. Countries have begun tightening rules on how children use social media. The shift has gathered speed over the past year. Australia was the first to take a dramatic step. Last year, it banned social media accounts for children under 16.
This reform will change lives for Australian kids and allowing them to just have their childhood. For Australian parents, enabling them to have greater peace of mind.
Across Europe, the momentum is building. France is moving towards a ban for those under 15. Spain, Denmark, Turkey, and others are all considering similar rules.
Do we want technology that normalizes and amplifies deception? That turns privacy into a commodity? A society in which a tech oligarch can meddle, just as they meddled yesterday, in the mobile phones of millions of citizens to tell them lies?
Even India is in talks with social media firms over age-based restrictions.
Similar question is about age-based. This is something which has now been accepted by many countries, that age-based regulation has to be there.
Supporters say firm limits are essential to protect children from harmful content and addictive design. Critics warn they are difficult to enforce and raise serious privacy concerns. The jury in Los Angeles will decide on this particular case, but the bigger reckoning over how these platforms are built, who they serve, and how far governments are willing to go is only just beginning.
Very consequential decision has been taken by the US Supreme Court. The US Supreme Court, in a 6-3 ruling, has struck down Donald Trump's tariff tyranny, so to speak. What we're being told is that the US Supreme Court has ruled that the tariffs that were imposed by Donald Trump as he went about weaponizing trade are illegal. Not all of them, but a majority of them. And let me very quickly update you if you're just joining this big broadcast, because remember, this decision comes in the midst of protracted conversations between Delhi and DC over the Indo-US nuclear deal.